But yes, hello everyone and welcome to this breakout session within the 2024 Women in Football Conference Be Inspired. I am Angelina Kelly. I am your host for this session all about tech, football business and all that good stuff. So basically we're just going to be talking about the media, tech, football business and how you can boost your career. So a little bit about me. I am a sports journalist by trade. I've been in this industry, about 10 years now. I work a lot within social media, YouTube, do a bit of presenting. Nowadays, you might hear this beautiful Mancunian accent on TalkSport every now and then talking about the dire state of my club, Manchester United. But luckily for me, we're not going to talk about that. I'm not going to subject you to that. We are going to be talking all about the career options within the footballing industry that has a crossover into tech. And I've got 4 fabulous ladies that are going to talk to you all about that. So we have got Ali Brabant, we have got Tina Keech, we have got Holly Shand, and we have got Preeti Shetty. So first up, I'm not going to tell you about them because what's the point in that? You guys may as well tell us a little bit about yourselves and maybe how you got into the industries that you find yourselves in. So we'll start with you, Ali.
Great. This is the downside of sitting in the first seat.
Yes.
I'm Ali. I'm the head of product at a company called Gemini Sports Analytics, and we're a technology platform software company that is helping sports teams accelerate their organizational data maturity by helping them with their data infrastructure, descriptive and predictive analytics, and then end state analysis to help them make better and faster data-informed decisions. We're a very early stage startup. We have like 13 employees. We've been around for like a year. So pretty cool, really exciting to work with different sports teams and help them move faster into the data space. My background's largely in data and data products. Started my career at a startup that did data aggregation and visualization. That company was acquired by Amazon. I was at Amazon for a number of years before tiring of being at such a massive company and went more directly into sports. At that point, worked for a couple of different sports tech companies. Catapult, if anyone's familiar, does GPS tracking. And then Second Spectrum, which is optical tracking at stadiums. They're in the EPL. Manchester City, women's is the only women's team that uses them over here. And then have been at Gemini for the last almost year now. I think I answered your question.
Yeah, I think so. What about you, Tina?
So I am head of women's football research at Sports Interactive, and we make the game Football Manager. So I actually started my career in the analytics world for a company which was mainly for gambling, and then they later moved into scouting, like helping football clubs, maybe just one football club, Brentford. And then I got into this industry just by chance, just by looking at LinkedIn, found women's football, it said Football Manager. I was like, oh, okay, I'll give it a go. So I just ended up in it. But I mean, I guess I've been surrounded by tech and data my entire career. Definitely wasn't what I was thinking I was going to go into. And yeah, I've just run with it really. But women's football is being added to the game this year. So we are very much full steam ahead in adding our data, analysing players. Designers are going full steam ahead, the coders, the match engine. So yeah, it's pretty full on at the moment.
Okay, I'm Holly. I'm a content creator for the Premier League's fantasy football game, and I also work freelance doing things for The Athletic and Sky Sports News and the Premier League themselves. Didn't ever imagine working in football. I did maths at uni because I loved maths, and then decided to be a maths teacher. And then I started playing FPL off the back of the World Cup in 2014, found this whole community online that I then got involved with, started my own website, and then I got to the stage where I was going back to work from maternity leave, and it was a decision of what am I not going to continue with, and obviously the parenting had to do that. So it was between teaching and the fantasy stuff. So I took the plunge and haven't really looked back. Rebranded myself along the way, started to focus more on the video content because that's where I could see it was going. I'd not always been that strong on the tech side of things, but I brought in an editor in the last year, met him actually for the first time on Monday night because he's London-based and I live up in Grimsby, it was great to finally see him, and won a football content award at the end of last year for, you know, pursuing shorts, which no one else was doing in FPL, and everyone started doing them now.
Just copying you, basically.
Exactly. Hi everyone, my name is Preeti Shetty. I am the CEO of Upshot, which is a tech social enterprise that works with sports organizations, mostly grassroots organizations, to help them measure their social impact. And so really very much looking at data and digital to try and evidence the good that sport can do for people and for communities. I'm involved with a couple of tech businesses. I am a founding advisor for Ready Sport Global, which looks, it's a consulting company that looks at educating mostly women's sport around emerging tech, so looking at things like AI and blockchain. And I'm just starting a brand new tiny baby startup called Valor, which is, we're building a platform that will allow women working in sport to benchmark their pay. So trying to look at pay equity and pay transparency. I also did not think this is what I would be doing. I fell into it completely by accident. I'm actually not very techie at all, and I'm really bad with like even Excel and things like that. So it's funny that I work in data, and I think the trick to that is hire people that are better than you. But yeah, I actually did my dissertation on Upshot. Because I was really interested in the social impact side of things. And I was trying to understand how, you know, we say sport does all these amazing things. I wanted to get to the bottom of how could we prove it. And I ended up working at the Football Foundation for nearly a decade. And 3 years ago, I bought Upshot off the Football Foundation. And now I run it.
Wonderful. I think one thing for me, when I knew that I was going to be, you know, working with you guys, talking about this subject, tech and football, two very male-dominated industries. We've got 4 fantastic women here. I just wanted to ask, has that been something that you've maybe had some barriers, or have you faced any challenges, or maybe not, with you know, having to come across that?
I'm happy to go first.
Yeah.
For me, the biggest thing has been hiring. Like for a really long time, my team was 8 white men under the age of 30. And I just couldn't get any diversity. And I was actively looking for it. But it's quite hard when in that hiring space, it's sport, or it's football, and it's tech. And so that hiring pool was really small. And so I actively had to go out, and I do a lot of speaking at colleges and universities, talking to young people, especially young women, about the fact that this is a career and it's really interesting, and you get to do really fun stuff, because it's not naturally, I don't think anyone grows up like us going, oh, I want to work in sports tech, or I want to work with data. And so I feel like it's something that I've had to explain to people, to say this is super interesting, here's what it means in real life. And obviously, I mean, with all of our careers, like, it's actually super interesting. You just wouldn't know it unless you know someone who does it. So for me, that's probably been the hardest part of intersecting both those industries.
Yeah, I found some positives though, like obviously when Sky Sports decided they was going to do their own fantasy show, they wanted representation on their sofa. So I've certainly got some opportunities by being a woman in the industry. And like I started working with The Athletic 3 years ago, and that came from going on a talent ID day, which was specifically for women. So I think, you know, the big brands are definitely conscious of having that representation and having more women in their workplaces. And, you know, I've been in the right place at the right time to use that to my advantage.
Yeah, I think that we've struggled with recruitment as well. We've got so many different areas that even today, yesterday I had to go in and go, so where do you work? What is that? And literally, I think the main one was the testers for the game. Literally, you're going to play the game, but having the knowledge of women's football. Yeah. You won't believe, we've got 280 people, and there's only 3 of us that are actual experts in women's football. And I am constantly going out there trying to go, please come, we've got tester roles, we've got research roles, we've got QA, we've got designer roles, you know, art and animation, so please get the word out to your friends. Sports Interactive is the place to come, and you know, it is, I would not be there if it wasn't a good environment for women. I do truly believe it's pushing the women's game, and they support women in everything they do. So yeah, it is really positive, but it is a real struggle to get women into the company.
Yeah, and then I think especially on the tech side of things, there are so few women. I'm almost always the only person in the room. Last year I was at a conference for one of the big leagues in the US, and there were like 50 people there, and I was quite literally the only woman there. And I'm in charge of all of our technical teams in-house, and everyone there kept asking questions of our sales guy because he was with me. And it can be frustrating. It can also be kind of almost comical because it's like, come on, what are you doing? But there's a lot of like virtue signaling that you have to do. Like my background's in data engineering and product management, but I also I studied environmental science in college, which has literally nothing to do with what I've ever done in my career. But there's a lot of yeah, I built that thing and I did that thing, just so you know, to build that trust, particularly when talking to external people in sport, particularly in men's sport, and particularly at conferences where it's a little bit of a, oh yeah, remember that time we went partying together 10 years ago in Japan? And I'm just sitting there like, great, good job. It's changing a bit, but it can be tough for sure. And on the technical side, there are even fewer people. A lot of times, tech companies and sports tech companies are like, we're getting closer to parity, but then you look at the actual split, and it's sales and marketing has, say, 40% women. Technical side is like 2. So yeah, and I think the hiring is really hard. I run our engineering team, so software engineering, data science, data engineering, and we have 1 female engineer, and we want to change that. We don't get that many applications from females, and a lot of that starts earlier. Women drop out of technical and STEM fields a lot earlier, and so on and so forth.
Someone in the company actually explained, we were looking for a tester who knew women's football. He said, we're looking for that unicorn, and I haven't found that unicorn yet. I'm like, oh my gosh.
We say that literally all the time.
Yeah, which for me, ridiculous. I'm like, we need to go and create them. Because it's like,
go create that unicorn.
We have to go and make sure that there are young women that think this is interesting, think it's a viable career, think it's financially rewarding, think that they won't be the only woman in the room, because why would you want to do it otherwise?
Yeah. I was talking to this woman who's one of the OG female data scientists. She worked for Arsenal for a long time and just founded her own firm. And we were at an analytics conference last weekend, and she was saying that she's decided to start just looking at all of the college women's soccer programs in the US and find any player with some sort of STEM background and just take them on, because she's like, I can teach them, a lot of technical skills are just tools that you need to learn, and you can learn those on the job. I learned all of the engineering coding skills that I learned at work early in my career, and she was like, that's my new path, because I can't find people otherwise, and this is what I'm going to do. So I thought that was really interesting and just a really cool way to think about it.
Yeah, definitely. It's a good tactic to kind of take with it, isn't it? Ali, sticking with you and talking, about Gemini Sports Analytics, and could you tell us a little bit more about it and a little bit more about this whole idea of making sure that players and teams are making good decisions? Yeah,
absolutely. So data underpins kind of everything these days, and the amount of data in sport has just absolutely exploded over the last 30 years. And most teams don't really know what to do with their data. I worked with a couple of different companies that generated data for teams, and I would talk to my customers and they'd be like, yeah, we use 3 fields of that data set. And I was just sitting there thinking to myself, well, all this data is there for a reason. So if you could use it, what other things could you do with it? What edge could you get over competitors? Because nowadays, everyone has the same data. Everyone uses the same 5 or 6 data providers in a given sport. It's how you actually use that data to then go find a player that you wouldn't have already gone to find, or how you change your tactics when you're losing in a game against this type of opponent, et cetera, et cetera. So what we're doing at Gemini is we're helping teams go from that, we have all of this data, we think that's kind of enough, to we have all this data, but it actually doesn't matter until we can make decisions off of it or take action off of it. So we help teams, and a lot of times this is kind of the most basic step, set up a centralized data infrastructure. So have all of your data in one place. And that data can be things like on the field, like number of passes, number of shots, assists, et cetera, to perform physical data. So how far did you run? How many sprints? How many accelerations? To then gym-based data, like how much did you lift? What did your week look like? Health data, all kinds of things. It can expand and expand. And when you only look at one of those at a time, you're only looking at one facet of a player. But if you can combine all of those into a holistic view of the player, you can get a much better sense of where they are and where they need to go and how they can evolve. So that's kind of step one, and we help teams with that. And then from there, we have a software platform that allows semi-technical people, so you need to understand data, but you don't need to be a coder, to find the data that they want and then turn that into descriptive and then finally predictive analytics. So what that means is descriptive looks at where have we been, like what's already been happening. So you can see like, all right, if my players run X amount in this part of the field, we're more likely to win the ball. So now in training, I can go practice that type of thing. Whereas predictive is more like, okay, if I do X, Y, and Z action, that's more likely to lead to this result because I've built a model using machine learning to tell me that. And now I can try to do that more in the game. So it's both looking at the past and then using that to predict what's going to happen in the future so I can do better on the field with my player acquisition, so on and so forth.
Fantastic. Tina, what exactly is Sports Interactive doing with regards to the women's game?
So, first of all, we're adding women's football to the game this year. I mean, we announced it 3 years ago, but we're and it's taken a lot to actually get the game going, just from basic things of making sure, essentially we've got the men's game and they were hoping you could just copy it for the women's, but it's not the same. The women's football, we play it differently. And there are just so many intricacies that have taken so long to just work out, and there's still so much to do. So on top of that, you know, we look to support, we look to partner up with different organisations. Women in football, obviously, She's Got Skills. I made a note of this, cannot remember now. Alt Faudi FC, I think their merchandise as well. But on top of that, it's about diversity for us as well. So I know Murky FC, which Ricardo is very proud of because he set that one up. And yeah, we have, you know, steering groups within the company as well. And we look out not just for football, but we go out into the women in game. So it's about bringing the women's football to different audiences. So we've obviously got the Football Manager audience, and hopefully they're going to see the women's game. They're going to see the players and go, oh, this is really interesting. And then on the other side, it's bringing the women's football fans to Football Manager and going, wow, this is really what I want. I want to be able to go in and manage my team. And hopefully from that, it's going to create people go, okay, I want to work. I want to be part of this. I want people to come and say to me, okay, your data's actually not that good. You've got that wrong. Okay, brilliant. Come in and help me make it better. Or come in and make the animations better. Come in and make our match engine better. And I think what is really important, you don't have to be a techie person. You don't have to be into analytics. I'm none of those, none whatsoever. But I just have a passion for the game and I've got an eye for it. And yeah, I do like a video game.
I think also on that point, what's really interesting is our companies have been talking about doing potentially something together. And something we've been talking about internally is that the women's game has much less data than the men's game. So when I go out and try to talk to women's teams, they're like, well, we have a year and a half or 2 years of kind of like spotty data, particularly if you're not the WSL or the NWSL. So it's kind of like, well, we can't really do predictive analytics on that because there's just not enough to predict anything on. But Football Manager has the largest scouting data set of anything in the entire world. So if we can do something with maybe non-traditional things in the women's game to help drive that data access forward, like there are really interesting avenues when you don't think about the women's game just like the men's game.
Yeah, I think, you know, Football Manager is renowned for its in-depth knowledge and data. And so trying to do that for the women's game has been really hard, and it's grabbing the data that's out there, but using the traditional scouting methods, bringing it together and using the Football Manager methodology to create this new data set, which we do. I'm hoping that it's going to help football clubs, individuals, and hopefully go further than we ever anticipated. Big dreams, big hopes that happen.
That's what we like to hear, big dreams, big hopes. Holly, obviously for you, you've created a brand, but you are your own brand. You know, you've built a brand around your name, you know, the expertise that you offer. What's that experience been like, you know, building yourself in that way?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to put yourself out there, and when I had my website, I was able to like hide behind that brand, but then I saw that things were going in a different way, and people were far more invested in the person. And because I've like had the privilege of working at different places, people genuinely want to know like my opinion on who they should get in their fantasy team each week. But then you've got the troubles with social media, particularly Twitter seems really bad at the moment. And you know, when I won the award last year, I got trolled for winning the award because there was different fan bases for other YouTubers that had bigger followings that were like, well, why haven't they won? Because more people watch their videos and all this. And you know, it's not just about that, but you have to have a thick skin when it comes to social media, because you know, it's always there. And I feel like I've got to the point where I've kind of taken a step back from Twitter and focused on, you know, the other platforms, because it's a lot more positive there. Because I just feel like every time I put something on Twitter, I'm second guessing it all the time.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I know me, like, you know, doing bits of presenting with YouTube and stuff like that, Twitter is, I avoid it, I'll be honest. Now, Preeti, you wear a lot of hats. But I want you to really focus in on how in your work you're using tech for good.
Yeah, so a lot of, I mean, that's like, you know, I guess similar to these guys, the passion isn't tech. The passion is the good bit, right? Like how do we, there's lots of bad in the world, but there's lots of good in the world, and how do we articulate that sport can make a positive difference, and how do we know that it's the sport that's doing it and not everything else? And the way I go about it is using technology. As tech was, you know, that was the reason for being. It should help us get better, right? And so with my work with Upshot, a lot of what we're looking at is, you know, we've got sports clubs and federations and NGBs that go, and we know participation is a huge deal. Like they're actively going out and running programs and projects and activities to get more people active, to solve a social issue. How do we know that it works? And if we can pinpoint exactly what does work, how can we replicate and scale? How can we share that with everybody else? The benefit of being on this side of sport is that we want to collaborate, right? It's in everybody's interest because we're working with people. It's in everybody's interest that sports succeeds. And so we have a lot of sharing of data, and we have a lot of sharing of learning that basically says, you know, these are the things that work for this age group, for women, for girls under 13, for this ethnic background. And that's the kind of stuff that we're pulling out and then feeding back to the sector to help them make better decisions, really. A big thing that I'm trying to do with some of the other companies, and especially Ready, is because we're not seeing enough women involved with tech is being built by men, and therefore it has biases built in, right? And if we don't influence those biases, then we're going to end up with products that aren't built for us. A really good example for, you know, AI, everyone's talking about AI and how amazing it is. AI is just based on the data sets that we're feeding it, and we're feeding it mostly male data sets because that's what exists in the world. A really good example, if you Google CEO dress code, you will just see photos of hundreds of men, mostly white, in suits. Just men. There is actually one woman and she's wearing a pink suit. and that's because there isn't enough. And for a long time, if you Google the word lioness, you saw female lions. Whereas now, you will see female lions, but you will also see the lionesses. And so it's really important that we are influencing and feeding that so that technology knows what to do with it. And that's a huge part of, you know, when we're saying come get involved, it's because we get to shape the beauty of technology, and especially the internet. It's changing every day. It's getting better every day. So if we aren't involved in that, we're not going to be part of that future. And so it's super important, especially from a women's sport perspective, that we are showing it what exists and what can exist, so that obviously it can help us get better.
Yeah, I think to that, I went and worked for an optical tracking company. They use jersey numbers to try to predict what player was on the field and where they were on the field. And they didn't account, it had been built by all white men. They had only ever done men's sports. They tried to track the NCAA March Madness tournament for women, it was 2021, I believe, maybe 2022, and they forgot about ponytails. So they couldn't really track the women's game. It was way worse quality than the men's because they were like, well, the ponytail's blocking the numbers sometimes. And then also like the back jersey, like name or whatever. And they just truly had not thought about it. And I was in there like working with them, and it just blew their mind. And it blew my mind that they just hadn't thought about it at all. So like I think having, to your point, having more women in the room when you're designing these tech solutions, particularly on the technical side, when you're like really getting into the tech of it, means that you have a more holistic solution that applies to not just the one cohort.
Never forget about the ponytails.
That's my learning.
Yeah. You know, talking about AI, just so, you know, speaking with you, Ali, you know, about Gemini Sports Analytics, how is AI working into that, and what do you see, you know, the future of AI in this industry?
Yeah, so AI is funny because it's such a buzzword right now, but it's been around for ages. I was at Amazon almost 10 years ago now when we were doing AI. I was working on Alexa, so there's a lot of AI in there. We use AI mainly to help us make our tools more accessible to less technical people. So generally, in order to pull data and then do analyses on data, you have to be an engineer. You have to know how to code. Which is fine, but that's not super accessible to a lot of people. There are plenty of people that work in sport or outside of sport and other industries that can understand data, understand spreadsheets, et cetera, without knowing how to code. So we use AI in our platform to turn it from, oh, you have to write a bunch of different code in a bunch of different languages to get the data you want, and then build a model on top of it, to just button clicking, for lack of a better phrase. Where you can use your understanding but apply it to a user interface that's a lot friendlier to people that aren't engineers by background. That's actually how I learned how to code back in the day. So that's one way. And then the other way is something we see with data products a lot is there's a really big gap between who's building the data analysis and who's actually consuming it to make decisions. We call them the builders and the consumers. Because a lot of times it's the technical people who speak one language, and then the people who are the football people or the decision makers or the CEO who speak a totally different language. And those people are very far apart, and it's really hard to use data to make good decisions when you can't really talk to each other that well. And we're using AI, particularly we're getting into like generative AI, so natural language talking to your data in our platform, so that people that are less technical can talk to the results that the builders are building in a more natural way, to raise that floor of understanding and bring those people closer together, so that that flywheel of, oh, this is what I'm trying to do, here's some data that supports it, let me bring in my subject matter expertise, that becomes more of a collaborative conversation and just instead of something that's really threatening.
I like how you said about it being a buzzword, AI, as well, because it seems like everywhere you go, it is all people are talking about. Tina, I know that you've kind of touched on how there are so many different areas, but you know, what opportunities are there from your perspective for women within this industry? Because I know we've spoken before about, you know, there's animation, there's so many different levels, isn't there?
Yeah, I think, you know, I'm going to speak mainly for where I work in the research side. So and when I say I work in the research and the analytics side, people go, oh, you've got a maths degree. No, I'm absolutely terrible. I can't even do my year 2 child's homework, to be honest. I'm like, go ask the accountant daddy over there. I literally just love football, so I watch and I scout them. That's what I do, and I think that's really it. So yeah, I don't want women to be put off by the word analytics and tech, because it's not like that at all. It is literally like, you love football, you can understand football, come and help these companies. Yeah, so that's the research side of it, and yeah, the animation side, but the real lack of women's football experts we have within Sports Interactive, and like many have said, within the tech industry is really sad, to be honest. There's so much growth going on, and we really need women to come in and not be scared about it.
Holly, you know, you touched on how you got more into the tech side and with the shorts and everything like that. Can you just expand a little bit on how important that part of it has become in the work that you do?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you look at how people consume content nowadays, and I've noticed even like my husband will be sat on the sofa just scrolling through Instagram. And
it's really annoying, isn't it?
Yeah.
Just have a chat to me, you know?
2 years ago, we didn't do that. There's this thing now called...
tried like turning the Wi-Fi off or something.
There's like no one was talking about vertical content, but from the outside, you think, oh, you know, a 1-minute video, like, surely you can just put that together. And I think if you're a lot younger than I am, then you can go on TikTok and play the games and the algorithms. But I want to put out content that I'm proud of, that's kind of like true to me. So I did try and play the game on TikTok, but felt a bit silly because I was too old. So I started doing fully edited videos, but you know, you see all these things crashing in, and I was like, I've not quite got the skill set for this. And I'm at a stage where if my editor's got other stuff on, then I can do it if I really have to. But you know, I'm able to put the script together and record and that sort of stuff. But it's just become so important. Like we've all got phones in our pockets that are vertical screens. People haven't got the patience now to watch a YouTube video that's long form on their phone and turn it round, and you can't reply to a text message because you're on YouTube. Like the world is changing, so you kind of just have to adapt to keep up with that.
Yeah, it is funny. I'll be honest, yeah, YouTube, if I can't reply to it, this is the world that we're in now. It's like if I can't reply to a text message immediately, then I'm going to be absolutely fuming. Preeti, one thing that you are passionate about, as we are all passionate about, is getting women in this industry, but you've also touched on the influence that women can have on the internet. How do we get involved with this? Tell us more about it.
So there's lots of amazing campaigns that are happening at the moment. So there's a great one called, I think it's called Correct the Internet, which is awesome. And it's basically things like, you know, that thing that we see that happens all the time where a male footballer does something and they go, he's the first person to do that. And it's like, no, he's not. He's the first male person to do that. The internet, because it's fallible and it's built on what we feed it, makes mistakes. And there are plenty of mistakes out there, which because somebody reads it on Wikipedia thinks, oh my God, that must be true, and they write it in their essay and it becomes the truth because history is written by the winners. It's a campaign to look at how do we correct it so that women's accomplishments are recognized, especially in sport, right? Who was the first woman to have ever done it? And maybe it wasn't that big a deal because it wasn't televised at the time, but that didn't mean it didn't happen. And so there's plenty of campaigns like that you know, you can get involved with. But for me, a lot of it is there are new things being built every day, right? And because, exactly as Ali said, because we are at the point with technology where we don't have to be techie to build those things. There are loads of no-code products, for example, where like, I'm not a coder, I have no idea how to do any of these things, but I know enough that I can go and Google it and I can go build you an app.
Or you could ask ChatGPT these days.
Or ask ChatGPT to build me an app, which is even better. And so, you know, it's about just taking back control a little bit. Like for a long time, it's just one more barrier that we can break. Because for a long time, it was like, oh, we can't do that because we need the IT guy to do it. Well, actually, we don't. We can do this ourselves, right? So it's really about understanding where we want to change everything from visibility to representation. We have access to knowledge now, and we have it at our fingertips. And being involved with what direction that takes is super important. That doesn't mean you have to go and become, you know, work in a tech department. Obviously, that would be awesome too. But it's just about understanding every small things like websites that you're building at your organization. Are they accessible? Are they, when you're writing job descriptions, and where are they going out? Are they going to places that women are looking? And it can be really small things, but think about how your products are being used. Think about how you interact with tech. Holly was just saying, you know, the algorithm, we all know you say something to your mate and then you see an advert for it on it. We know it's listening. So tell it the things that you want it to know, right? And that's something we can shape really easily. And we don't need to go and do a degree in this to get involved. We just need to actively take back control. So a big part of, you know, some of you will know and some of you won't, where blockchain technology is taking us. It will be, again, I don't need to know how blockchain works. It's like my phone. It works and I use it. And that's what blockchain is going to be like. It's going to be everywhere, but all that it's doing is giving us control of our own data. I don't know how many things I've signed up to get free Wi-Fi around the city, and they've all got my data. I want the ability to say, I want to take that data back from you. I want to know what you know about me. And that's really important because I might want to correct it. I might want you not to have it. And that's stuff that before was out of our reach. And now we will have the ability to control that. And don't take that lightly. This is something that even if it's just in the back of your head, think about what you're accessing, how you're accessing it, what that means for you. But it's an opportunity like we've never had before. And it's super exciting when we think about sport and we think about the data that is sporadic right now. We're building a data set every single day. Yes, about our players, but also about women who work in sport. Yvonne said it yesterday. We cannot say how many women work in the sport industry. That's insane. But we are collecting that data every day. WIF has 9,000 members. That's growing. That's how we change this, and that's how we start to tell our own stories.
100%, and I love that idea of, you know, taking back that control and that power. I think it's so important. Ali, with your role, are there any, you know, really interesting projects that you want to share with us? Anything upcoming that's been exciting, or?
Yeah, definitely. There are always projects that are exciting. Since we're so early, we're building things and releasing things literally all the time. One of the things that gets me most excited, I talked about a little bit earlier, is how do we bring technical and less technical people closer together so that data-driven decisions aren't scary. I think like Preeti was saying, tech and particularly data can be really intimidating, because particularly older people in an organization are like, yeah, the person over there is going to deal with that, and they're just going to tell me what I need. And then you're kind of like, well, I don't know where that came from, so why should I believe that? So a lot of the things that I think a lot about and that we're building towards is how do we make data more explainable? How do we bring those people closer together? So we're releasing some features around, like I mentioned before, talking to your data, so being able to understand it. Instead of getting like one number for a prediction, can you get a range that this person is going to fall into? So like if I go to my CEO and I'm like, yeah, that person is going to score 10 goals next year, they're going to laugh at me, because how on earth could I know that? But if I go to the I don't know why I said CEO, but we'll keep with that. And say they'll probably, like, they're most likely to score between 6 and 12 goals next year. Like, that's a lot more reasonable, and that's a lot more explainable. And how do we bring people along the journey with us is something that I think about, particularly as we go into what we're going to build over the next 3 to 6 months. And then the other thing that I'm really excited that we launched really recently is being able to take qualitative data. So a lot of sports teams scout players or write wellness reports just on pieces of paper. And we released a feature really recently where you can upload those files, and we run natural language processing models on it. And what that means is they're algorithms on the internet. I don't fully know how they work, to be honest, but they work. And they've been around forever. And they can pull out keywords from that text, the sentiment of it. So like, was it more positive? Was it more negative? Was it neutral, et cetera? But what's really powerful about this is it allows teams to combine quantitative data, which is like number of passes, how much a player's lifting, whatever, with qualitative data about how they say they're doing. So let's say a player on a day says like they didn't sleep well, and then you see their numbers in the gym go down. Previously, you may know that if you can remember they said they didn't sleep well and then be like, oh yeah, that's why. But you can remember it about that one player on that one day. But if we can start seeing trends around that over time by getting a holistic view of athletes, that's really, really powerful, particularly as we're going into scouting and player development from youth up into first team, or in the US from college into pros. So that's something I'm really excited about that we released really recently.
Yeah. Tina, we know Football Manager out in November. I mean, is there anything you can tell us?
But we mention it again.
But no, we want any other little details that you can maybe share with us. We won't tell anyone about it, I promise.
It's not videotaped.
But yeah, what projects have you been a part of, or has Sports Interactive been a part of, that you have really enjoyed?
So I think what I'm really proud of, just the company, not just me, is just some of these partnerships that we do. You know, Faudi, for example. I remember coming into a company and they had merchandise, men's sizes didn't fit me, really like just round neck. I like a bit of a V-neck every now and then. So, you know, going out there in Faudis, for example. But I think what I'm really proud of is, I mean, it's still to come, but I have every confidence, like the partnerships we're going to have with the women's teams, and the marketing, and I know we're rebranding as well, so it's all of that that's coming in, and there'll be link-ups with players as well, and putting them into this game that's been around for 25 years, and to be honest, you know, I'm sure friends and family members of yours are playing it. I used to play it at uni. I think that's what I'm really excited and proud to be part of. And there was definitely something else, and I can't remember it, so we'll just move on.
Yeah, we can circle back. Holly, where do you see the future of FPL? I mean, are we going to be getting a women's football version? Where do you personally see it progressing?
I mean, I'd love for there to be a women's football version, and I feel like every time a major women's tournament comes around and there's not an official game, I find it really frustrating.
Sorry, can I just say...
There she is! There she is!
Women's football version, so
Right, okay.
we have one now.
Oh,
Amazing.
that's brilliant.
Fantastic.
But like, it was like when it was, because obviously it doesn't cost lots of money to run a fantasy game, and UEFA and FIFA have been running the games for their major tournaments for ages, and it's just such a massive advert for the game, because you're not only getting invested in, you know, your team or your favourite player, but you're also getting invested in other teams and other players, and you're watching games that you wouldn't necessarily have that interest in. So that's one big thing. But I also think that the FPL game can grow in a way that, you know, someone like me would be going into a press conference to get the FPL take before a match or after a game. Or, you know, we see now we have referees as pundits on goal shows. Maybe, obviously, since Sky have had their contract with Fantasy Premier League, we start to get information on player ownership and things like that on their on-screen graphics, and to have a dedicated fantasy expert on those shows as well will really just integrate it more. But it seems like it's everywhere. Like, you know, you see pundits on a goal show getting excited because someone in their FPL team scored. You hear it referenced a lot on the radio now. So I feel like it will get to that point. And you look at the US, where fantasy games are so massive, you can see exactly where it can go in the future.
Have you got any key tips for us?
There you go.
As we know, it's a big. You were saying it's a big week
it's a big week.
upcoming.
Yeah.
So any key tips you can share with us? Or?
Yeah, so there's only 4 fixtures this weekend because of the FA Cup quarter-finals. So you may log in and see that you've only got about 4 players. If you haven't played your free hit chip, this is the week to do it. If you've played the free hit chip, then you're going to be in trouble. But I think if you get the core of attacking players that have got decent form, then you should be okay. So you need Son, you need Watkins, you need Tony, probably add in another Spurs midfielder. That'll get you some of the way there, but don't destroy your team for this week, because it's probably not going to be your main focus going forward, looking at kind of the calibre of teams that are involved this week.
Right,
No
well, we've
offence.
heard it all here. If anyone has any success, please let Holly know.
I'm just excited that we had a Brentford player mentioned.
Yeah, 3 Brentford players on my team for a
Thank
month for this week.
What about those that just miss the deadline and then forget their logins?
You need to download the Premier League app and set notifications.
If someone has those notifications on, it is
And then it'll
a drama.
say 2 hours until the deadline.
If you've had a lie-in one day, well, a very late lie-in one day, maybe, you were out the night before, you've not sorted yet. The notifications have changed things for me. Preeti,
Rubbish at tech.
one thing I wanted to ask you, obviously you're involved with Brentford Football Club. How has that process been, being a director there?
It's been amazing. There's a few people representing today, which is awesome. I think my favorite thing about it is how it happened. I love telling this story, and it's actually thanks to Monique, who's sitting right there, who used to also be on the board of Brentford. But my favorite thing about it is I saw the advert on the internet. Like, I didn't know that I didn't have a connection to Brentford. They went to open advert, which is an incredible thing, and they decided, Monique's idea, that they should cast the net wide. And so they did, and they put an advert on Sky Sports, and lots of different kinds of people applied. And for me, it's testament to how you do diversity well, is you go out as far as you can and you get lots of different people, and then hopefully you pick the best one. In our case, there were 2, and they picked 2 of us. And that was 3 years ago, and it's been an incredible experience. I didn't know you could be a director. At the time, we were championship of a Premier League club. I'm non-exec. And it's been super interesting to see, obviously, the club grow, but also then to have that influence and to have it at the highest level, right? To be able to role model the behaviors, but also influence in areas, women and girls particularly, but in areas that that I care about, community, data, digital, like all of the things that I get to take all of my passions and I get to bring it over here to an organization that has money and power and influence, and that's an incredible thing. There's also a lot of pressure because there's a bit of like, I don't know, it's like paralysis sometimes, like you can do anything, so what is it that you're going to do? And I got some really good advice recently from somebody that said it doesn't need to be one big thing. It can be lots of little things that you do and you change, but there is a bit of, I don't want to waste this opportunity. There's not very many women on boards of Premier League clubs, and so what am I going to do with it, and how do I make sure that there's more of us when I leave? And it's the whole leave the door open, ladder down stuff. But yeah, it's been definitely a unique experience working on that side of football, men's elite football, and now women's, thankfully. But from somebody that's worked in the grassroots game for a long time, I'm just used to fighting for money for everything. So it's quite nice to be on this side and sort of say, great, we have that. What can we do with it? And how can we leave our club, our community, our fans, our staff in a better place than when we started?
You can use Gemini.
Yeah, we should talk.
I just wanted to check, are there any questions at this point? Yep, we can get to both those questions, yep.
Hi, I'm Monique. Mine was more of observation, information, and then a question for you jointly as a group of people. So I've been listening to what you're saying, and I've never done tech for a living, but I love tech and I love how it enables me and enables the decisions I make and how it spreads the net wider. But I've actually really been percolating this idea in my head around recruitment and why perhaps you're not getting out to the people you need to get to. So I think there's some real structural inequalities that are working there, which is how women have terrible imposter syndrome when they apply for things, and they want, unlike men, they want everything to be right. So if they don't see something that's listed in the words or the language that applies to them, they won't apply to it. And actually, I've got friends that I know who are now in tech who had no background, the same as the women I know who had no background, saw 3 things out of 10 and they applied to them and they got the job. So why is that happening? So that's one thing. But the second thing I also see is the word adverts. So I look at the job adverts for tech because I have, a daughter who's 25. I've got friends who've got kids that are coming out of uni, some who didn't go to uni, and they never say in the job ads, we are underrepresented by women in this business. And actually, the UK has one really interesting advantage, unlike the US. It is allowed to say, without fear of recrimination or punishment, we are underrepresented by a particular diversity characteristic. And I don't think people use that enough. They don't say we're underrepresented by women. We're underrepresented by people that didn't go to university. We're underrepresented by people who come from different social backgrounds. And we welcome all to apply, even if you're not an analytic guru or you're a tech guru. Come and join a company that wants you for your other skills, and you can develop all the skills you need. So it's about, I think, making the job ads really interesting, really appealing, and not going through bullet points to get them. So how do you find a way of making the process of recruitment really engaging and really exciting, so that even if you're the least techie person you at least have got some skin in the game of trying to apply to find out if there's something that will make you be attractive to that organisation. So I'm going to ask something which I think is present a lot in women's sort of circles, is would it be great for women who are working in these tech organisations to get together to talk about how they might jointly advertise or go and see people, so go out on the road? So could it be that Gemini, and Upshot and, your Sports Interactive get out there, go on a roadshow, go to a careers fair together in any way and find a way of jointly doing it. So it may be you are competing in the initial stage, but the grand result is that one person coming to you and being successful, you all win, because that's one more women in sport in this field that wasn't there previously. So maybe I'm saying, is there an opportunity to gather resources, thinking, ideas and innovation and look at differently about the way you go out to attract women from all backgrounds to come into the sport. So that it's really maybe it's a gauntlet question rather.
Yeah, no, I think
does that make sense?
It does, no, and I think there definitely is, right? And we're seeing a bit more. There's like women in sport tech groups and things like that.
In the US, there's women in sports tech.
There's literally that's the US one, and actually I think there is an opportunity for us to do more, but also showcase it more. It is interesting. So we've dropped any like degree requirements from our job adverts, and that has helped. Interestingly, recently I've had male tech CEOs, 3 people have done it, 3 different male tech CEOs have come to me and said, hey, will you look at our adverts and see if, because we can't get any women, are we writing it weirdly? And actually some of them were right. It's the way you write it. It's like, and the writing, and we see it in football too. This is a big football problem. Oh, we go out for beers every evening, so fun. And it's like, no, I can't do that. And so I do think there is something around sense checking things with each other, but also showcasing to a younger generation, look, we're cool, right?
Yeah,
maybe we find the cool women that work in tech and showcase them.
What are you saying?
No, we actually, someone from EA Sports was on a different panel this morning, and we've actually gone and spoken to them and said, right, can we like join forces from a women's perspective, even though we are very much probably competitors in the gaming industry. So thank you for the coaching, Monique.
As always.
Was there another question? Okay. Grab your mic.
There's a microphone for you.
Oh, sorry. Hi, I'm Hamisha. I work at the FA. I've had experience from the tech side, the sports side, and then I add on the fact that I have a finance background, so very male-dominated kind of experience. So I can completely relate to everything that you've said. One of the things, you spoke a lot about bringing new women into the space. What about that retention aspect and kind of that next level for the women who are already in there? Because I've been to any number of networking events and things like Leaders and all the various sports conferences. And you see the same faces, and you also find that the same faces have been at the FA 5 years ago and are now at a club. And it seems to just be this kind of pool of people that churn around the same. So how do you get new people in, but retain those people and get them through into those more senior roles where they can then bring in more and build that pipeline?
I mean, I think this is a football problem as well as a tech problem, right? It's like, and for me, there's a couple of things I'm obviously keen to hear you guys. I think it is how we advertise. Like, we're not really making it very attractive for people from outside of sport to want to come work in football. Like, all we can see is it's full of misogyny and it's terrible and the hours are long and people don't value you and the pay isn't great. Well, why would a banker or a lawyer or a marketing guru want to come and work in the industry? And I think partly it's, are we welcoming enough? And that I think is a general football problem. I also think for me a lot of this is to do with pay and pay transparency. I hate when you see an advert and it says competitive. I have no idea what competitive means. Yeah. And if you're a senior woman, I'm not going to waste my time doing an application to then find out you pay 20 grand less than I'm making now. Just give me a range. It's really simple. And if you are not in the industry, that feels even more alien, right? So I think an attraction problem and then a retention, like once they're in, what are we doing to promote, right? What are we doing to develop? I think that, again, we're not great at that. And Women in Football is doing a great job with their leadership courses. And there are things that are happening now, but again, it's kind of being done by women for women. Like if you look at the corporate world, there are development plans, there are pathways, there are policies, there are structures in place to show you where you can go and how you can get there and what that looks like. We don't have that yet. And when you look around, this is also where representation matters. Where are the female CEOs? There's not that many of them. And so, if you're a middle manager, even a senior manager, you're going, is this the best I'm going to do? Well, I might as well go somewhere else then. I've done my football bit. Why don't I go to that corporate job where I know how much I'm getting paid and I know how I'm going to get to the next step, right? So I think we need to think about this more broadly. And I think tech on its own does a pretty good job of, it's well paid depending on the bit of the industry you're in. But sports tech, and what stage? Yeah. Sports tech we're falling in that horrible.
Sports tech is tough.
Sports tech is tough, but you should all come work in it, obviously.
It just really depends the company too. Like I've worked at companies that are great. I've worked at companies that are pretty terrible. And it just like really depends. I think for the promotion and moving people upside, I forget who was talking yesterday, it might have been Monique, about like some of those conversations where you're like deemed emotional or you're deemed all the other stereotypes, bossy, aggressive, what have you. And particularly as you get more senior, that becomes more likely because you're in more of a leadership position. So I think part of it is like there's a lot you can do, but then how do we also educate the men we work with that we're not being emotional or bossy just because we're stating our opinion, or how do we help them along the journey too? And part of that, like I've worked with some really great male managers. One of the best manager I ever had was excellent at that, and I learned so much from him. And then I've had awful ones who just like throw you back 10 years, and it's like, what the heck? And that can get really frustrating, but I think bringing more people into the industry and then helping us all grow. I think what I've seen for all women I've met working in sport is there's a big sense of collaboration there, and like how do we grow together because you're kind of a minority. So it's a little bit less of a zero-sum game, at least in my experience, and I think there's a long way to go. I think it's gotten better. But yeah, I think there are development plans like at bigger companies. Like we're a really tiny startup that we have 13 people. Like we don't really have development plans, but I manage like half the company, so I can start putting those in place. And as women get into more senior positions, like I personally feel like I have a responsibility to like give back to places I've been before, or help other women that are trying to come up into that world. And then within my own company, which at times can be really frustrating. To have to drag that forward, but I also think it's really important to move the whole industry forward.
Well, brilliant. I think number one, massive round of applause for you four wonderful ladies.